Imagine living in a world where Europe is packed with powerful empires, where wars feel inevitable, and where most leaders believe the only way to solve problems is through force. Now imagine a man who stands up and says, "No. Peace is not a dream. Peace can be organized. Not through armies. Not through threats. But through economics, diplomacy, arbitration, and international cooperation." That man was Frederick Passy, a French economist, a politician, and one of the greatest early peace activists in modern history. And here's the surprising part: most people today have never even heard his name, even though he was one of the first people in history to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Today, we're going to dive deep into the life of Frederick Passy, the man who helped build the foundations of the modern peace movement long before the United Nations, long before global peace organizations, and long before the world was ready to listen. Frederick Passy was born in 1822 in France. He grew up in a country still recovering from the shock of the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. Europe in the early 1800s was unstable. Nations were fighting, borders were shifting, and empires were competing. War was considered normal. In fact, many people believed war was simply a natural part of history. But even as a young man, Passy started asking questions that most people never asked. Why do nations go to war? Who truly benefits? And who pays the real price? Passy studied economics and political science, and over time he became convinced that war was not only immoral, war was economically foolish. He believed war destroyed wealth, ruined societies, and delayed human progress. This idea, war as an economic disaster, became one of the core pillars of his life's mission. Now, Frederick Passy didn't just hate war in theory. He hated it because he understood what war did to ordinary people. In the 1800s, wars were not fought with precision weapons or modern technology. They were brutal, bloody, and extremely costly. Civilians suffered. Families were destroyed. Young men were taken from their homes and sent to die in battles that they didn't even understand. Passy believed most wars were started by politicians and elites, but paid for by the poor. Farmers, workers, students, and ordinary citizens were the ones who suffered the most. And as he grew older, Passy began speaking out publicly against war. This was not a safe thing to do. In those days, criticizing war could easily get you labeled as weak, unpatriotic, or even a traitor. But Passy didn't stop. Instead, he did something bigger. He began organizing. Frederick Passy became one of the early founders of the organized peace movement in Europe. He did not believe peace would happen automatically. He believed peace needed institutions. It needed organizations. It needed education. And it needed international cooperation. So he helped create peace societies in France and promoted ideas like diplomacy, negotiation, international arbitration, and economic cooperation between nations. Passy's message was simple but powerful. War is not inevitable. War is a choice. And peace is also a choice. This was revolutionary thinking at the time. Because many European leaders believed war was the engine of history. They believed war created national pride, expanded territory, and built empires. But Passy believed history could be changed. He believed nations could become more civilized and more rational. One of the most important turning points in Passy's life came during the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871. France and Prussia went to war, and it became a disaster for France. France lost badly. Paris was under siege. The French government collapsed. The country was humiliated. France lost territory, and the German Empire became unified. Europe became even more militarized. Passy looked at this tragedy and said, "This is exactly what I warned about." To him, the war proved his point. War does not solve problems. War creates new problems, bigger, deeper, and more dangerous. After the Franco-Prussian War, Passy became even more determined. He believed Europe was walking toward a future where wars would become larger, more destructive, and more deadly. And he was right. Only a few decades later, World War I would explode, becoming one of the most devastating conflicts in human history. So what exactly did Frederick Passy believe the world should do instead of war? He was not naive. He understood nations would always have conflicts. But he believed the solution was arbitration. Arbitration means that instead of going to war, nations should send their disputes to a neutral international court, where judges and diplomats could analyze the conflict and propose a fair settlement. This idea sounds normal today. But in the 1800s, it was radical. Passy was essentially saying that countries should solve problems the way civilized people solve problems, through law, negotiation, and agreements. He believed war should be the last option, not the first. He also believed international trade and economic cooperation could reduce conflict. If countries became economically connected, war would become too costly and irrational. Passy wanted nations to understand that peace was not just a moral goal. Peace was also practical. Peace created prosperity. Peace created stability. Peace allowed societies to grow. Passy was not only an activist. He also became a politician. He served in the French government as a member of parliament. This gave him something many peace activists never had: direct influence. He could speak inside the system, not just outside. And he used that influence to push for peaceful foreign policy, diplomatic cooperation, reduced militarism, and education about peace. Passy also wrote many articles and books. He believed peace had to be taught. Because if a society grows up glorifying war, then war becomes part of its identity. Passy wanted to change the culture. He wanted people to admire diplomacy more than violence. He wanted people to respect negotiation more than conquest. He wanted nations to see war not as heroic, but as tragic. Then came the most historic moment. In 1901, the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded for the first time ever. And Frederick Passy became one of the first winners in history. He shared the prize with another major humanitarian figure, Henry Dunant, the founder of the Red Cross. Think about how powerful that is. Frederick Passy's work was so important that the Nobel Committee recognized him as one of the key global symbols of peace. He was not a king. He was not a general. He was not a war hero. He was a peace builder. And the world finally honored him. Frederick Passy died in 1912. Just 2 years later, World War I began. A war so massive and so brutal that it reshaped the entire world. In a tragic way, World War I proved Passy was right. His warning was clear. If nations continue choosing militarism, the future will be catastrophic. Today, we live in a world where international diplomacy, arbitration, and peace organizations exist. We have the United Nations. We have international courts. We have peace treaties. We have humanitarian organizations. And while the world is still not perfect, much of the modern peace system was built on ideas that early thinkers like Frederick Passy pushed into history. Frederick Passy's story is not the story of a warrior. It is the story of a man who fought without weapons. A man who believed peace was possible even when the world laughed at him. And even though history moved slowly, his idea survived. So the next time you hear someone say, "Peace is impossible," remember Frederick Passy. Because one man, with no army, no empire, and no throne, helped shape the world's understanding of peace. If you enjoyed this deep history story, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more Nobel Prize winners and world history stories, and comment below, do you think peace is possible in today's world?